In this episode, tragedy strikes the Howe family for the second time in less than a decade. In the mid-1800s, a young boy was paddling with his family's servant along Australia's eastern coastline. In ankle-deep water, he is snatched by a shark. With little thought for his own safety, the boy's servant dives into the water after him. But will he be able to save the young boy's life? Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying shark attack on Alfred Howe. Welcome to Final Affliction. It was Wednesday, January 17, 1837. A young boy, patriotically named Alfred Australia Howe, was visiting a beach on Australia's east coast. The beach was at Trial Bay, where the Macleay River runs into the sea. Situated roughly midway between Brisbane and Sydney, the bay is a popular tourist destination today. Its turquoise sheltered waters offer excellent swimming and gentle swells for beginner surfers. The mouth of the river is a popular fishing spot, and the local history also adds to the appeal of this location. As dusk was setting in, the 12-year-old Alfred walked down to the sandy beach in the bay. He was accompanied by his servant. This man's job was to accompany the family on their outdoor trips and act as a bodyguard should the occasion arise. Alfred had already lost his father in a tragic accident 8 years before. This incident had also involved the Australian waters. When Alfred was only 4 years old, he and his father had been on a boat in Sydney Harbor. For unknown reasons, the boat capsized when the pair were trying to board another vessel. Alfred's father, George Howe, had swum after Alfred and managed to push him towards the safety of a nearby craft. Although he heroically saved his son, George Howe, owner of the Sydney Gazette newspaper, sadly drowned that day. He left behind his wife and their 3 children, including the young Alfred. Despite this family tragedy, Alfred was not dissuaded from the water. Living so close to the coast, his childhood was full of seaside visits and splashing in the warm waters off the Australian coast. On this particular day, he had walked along the beach, talking to the family's servant. He had played in the sand when they came to where the Macleay River ran into the sea. The flow of the river churned up the sandy, muddy bottom, giving the water a slight murkiness. Alfred paddled into the fresh current to wash the sand from his feet. Unknown to him, he was being watched by an underwater predator. The water gently ran over his toes in the ankle-deep river. He splashed and shook his feet slightly. Alfred looked down at them, watching as the sand was washed away. Then suddenly something burst out of the water. In an instant, a large shark grabbed Alfred by the legs. It thrashed its head from side to side as it pulled Alfred's feet from under him. He fell backwards, yelling out in alarm. The shark dragged the boy into the river and out towards the open ocean. Alfred could barely breathe as he tried to hold his head up above the water. The speed of the shark was incredible. The power of its jaws was immense. Alfred tried desperately to free his legs from the shark's almighty grip, but it was too powerful. Luckily, Alfred's servant, whose name was not provided by the newspaper, leapt into action. With no thought for his own safety, he jumped into the river. He ran through the shallows, shouting at Alfred, chasing after the shark. Just as the shark made it to the sea with Alfred in its grip, the servant dived for the small boy. He managed to grab hold of Alfred's hands. He pulled and pulled. He was determined not to let go. The boy was screaming, the shark was thrashing around, but mercifully, as the shark readjusted its grip on the boy, it momentarily released him. That was all that was needed. The servant managed to pull Alfred away. As he tugged the youngster, they fell backwards into the river, only feet from the sandy beach. Onlookers had run towards the commotion. Some of them began screaming at the two in the water. To their horror, the shark had done a U-turn in the sea and was now torpedoing back towards them. It began chasing them up the river. The servant picked up Alfred and ran to the shore. He escaped the water just in time. When he lay Alfred on the sand, the boy was still conscious, but he was bleeding heavily. The people on the beach who had witnessed the terrifying attack and the heroic save by the servant quickly rushed to his aid. They grabbed clothing and made makeshift tourniquets. They tied them tightly around Alfred's legs to stem the bleeding. According to witnesses, this had the desired effect and the blood flow from Alfred's gaping wounds was greatly reduced. He had lost a large chunk of flesh from the calf in one of his legs. Alfred began drifting in and out of consciousness as he was rushed to the hospital. It is not known what condition he was in when he arrived at the hospital. After being stitched up and assessed, the surgeon ordered him to be transferred to a hospital in the coastal town of Port Macquarie, south of Trial Bay. There, he was prepared for the amputation of one of his legs. Sadly, just 3 days after the attack, Alfred died from tetanus before they could operate. The Clostridium tetani bacteria responsible for causing tetanus had spread throughout Alfred's body. His nervous system was attacked and had shut down. Even today, there is no known cure, but symptoms are managed and people are vaccinated. Alfred Howe may have survived his injuries if modern-day medicine had been available. Today, shark attack victims are typically given a tetanus shot when they arrive at the hospital. If victims survive the initial shark attack, the aftercare is vital to ensure their survival. This includes treating the victim with antibiotics to keep infections at bay. The marine environment harbors many dangerous bacteria, as does a shark's mouth. Vibrio bacteria from a shark's mouth enter a person's bloodstream during an attack. If left untreated for 24 hours, fatality rates caused by Vibrio infection jump up to 30%. If left untreated for 72 hours, fatality jumps to 100%. Luckily, today's medical advances have increased the chances of survival in animal attacks. Sadly, Alfred Howe wasn't so lucky. It would be more than 120 years before the next recorded shark attack in Trial Bay. This time in 1961, the shark attack was provoked. Two spear fishermen, John Davy and John Pierpoint, injured a 1.4-meter wobbegong shark, which then spun around and bit the men on the legs and ankles. The attack didn't prove fatal. Another provoked attack that was reported a few years later in 1966 also occurred in Trial Bay. It happened when Stephen Lusted speared a gray nurse shark while spearfishing in deep water. The shark bit him in self-defense, but Stephen's companions fought it off and he survived the attack. The shark was killed by his friends. The attack on Alfred was unprovoked, but it could have been prevented. Since the 1800s, there has been a huge amount of education around sharks. More recently, they have been shown to be important animals in the ocean's ecosystems and are to be respected. The shark that attacked Stephen was likely hunting at the time, particularly given that the day was drawing to a close and dusk was setting in. Alfred seemed unaware of the dangers of entering the shallow waters at dusk and had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. In 2022, there were 12 unprovoked shark attacks in Australia's waters. 3 of these proved fatal. Knowing the dangers and understanding the behavior of sharks can go a long way to avoid being bitten. The Howe family had suffered terribly that decade. After losing her husband, Miss Howe now lost her young son and was left with 2 daughters to raise alone. Since then, there has been massive development in shark safety technology, but whenever we enter the water in shark territory, we must always be aware that we might meet our final affliction.